I am Brandon, 32 years old, and I built a tech empire worth over $20 million. But my parents never knew. When I finally visited them after 12 years, they called me an uneducated failure and kicked me out of their house. I just nodded, said okay, and left without revealing my success. Sometimes silence speaks louder than words, and I was about to learn that lesson in the most satisfying way possible. Before I continue my story, I would love to know where you are watching from. Take a second to drop your location in the comments. Hit that like button, and subscribe if you want more stories about standing your ground with dignity. Have you ever had to hide your success from judgmental family members? Let me know below. Growing up in a middle-class neighborhood in Columbus, Ohio, shaped my early understanding of success. My parents, Richard and Diane Miller, had very specific ideas about what achievement looked like. To them, life followed a strict formula: prestigious university, respectable degree, stable corporate job, comfortable retirement. Anything outside that narrow path was considered failure. From my earliest memories, our family dinner conversations revolved around the importance of academic excellence. My father would lecture endlessly about how education was the only ticket to a respectable life. "People judge you by your credentials," he would say while pointing his fork at me. "Without proper education, society sees you as worthless." My mother reinforced these messages by constantly showcasing newspaper clippings about local kids earning scholarships to Ivy League schools. She displayed these success stories on our refrigerator like trophies. Meanwhile, my report cards with C's and B's in traditional subjects were met with deep sighs and disappointed looks. The irony was that I actually loved learning, just not in the way they valued. While I struggled with memorizing historical dates and algebra formulas, I taught myself computer programming by age 12. I would stay up until 2 in the morning coding small games and building primitive websites. My room transformed into a workshop of disassembled computers, circuit boards, and technical manuals. "What a waste of time," my father declared when he saw my latest computer project. "This tinkering nonsense will never pay bills. Your cousin Jeffrey just got accepted to Princeton pre-med program. That is what ambition looks like." The comparisons were relentless. Every family gathering became an exercise in humiliation as relatives discussed my cousin's academic achievements while my parents changed the subject when asked about me. I became the family's black sheep, the cautionary tale they whispered about. High school only widened the gap between my parents' expectations and my interests. While I barely maintained a C average in mandatory classes, I won regional computer science competitions and started a tech repair service for teachers and neighbors. The small business brought in decent pocket money, but my parents dismissed it as playing with toys. Real success requires discipline and structure, my mother lectured after I asked to skip a family event to finish a website for a paying client. "Your little hobby is distracting you from what matters." By senior year, the constant criticism had worn me down. My entrepreneurial spirit remained, but I had learned to keep my ambitions private. When classmates asked about college plans, I gave vague answers, knowing my parents had already decided I would attend State University for business administration despite my complete lack of interest in the subject. In a half-hearted attempt to please them, I enrolled in community college after graduation, but my heart wasn't in it. I spent lectures sketching app designs in my notebook, while professors discussed accounting principles that bored me to tears. My grades reflected this divided attention, and each semester report triggered another round of parental disappointment. The breaking point came during my second year of community college. I had been developing a file-sharing application that showed real promise. A local tech entrepreneur had expressed interest in seed funding. After seeing my prototype, this was my chance to pursue what I truly loved. When I told my parents I wanted to drop out and focus on my startup idea, the reaction was nuclear. My father's face turned crimson as he slammed his fist on our kitchen table. "No son of mine will be a college dropout. You want to throw away your future on some computer fantasy. This is absolute madness." My mother was more subtle but equally dismissive. "Brandon, honey, you are just going through a phase. Everyone wants to be the next Bill Gates, but for every success story, thousands fail miserably. We just want security for you." Their refusal to even consider my perspective ignited something in me. Years of suppressed frustration bubbled to the surface. "You have never once supported what I actually care about," I said quietly. "Not once." The argument escalated quickly. Words were exchanged that could never be taken back. My father called me ungrateful and short-sighted. I called them controlling and blind. When the dust settled, we had reached an impasse. "If you drop out, do not expect any support from us," my father declared, financial or otherwise. 2 days later, I withdrew from my classes and moved out with only $2,000 to my name. I found the cheapest apartment I could afford in the industrial part of town. The space was barely 300 square feet with questionable plumbing and neighbors who argued through paper-thin walls at all hours. But it was mine, and for the first time I felt free to pursue my vision without constant judgment. I converted half the tiny living space into a makeshift office, using milk crates as furniture and working on a second-hand laptop. The first 6 months were brutal. My savings dwindled rapidly. I took odd tech repair jobs to keep the lights on while developing my software at night. I lived on ramen noodles and discount groceries. Some days I questioned everything, wondering if my parents had been right all along, but something inside wouldn't let me give up. This was my path, and I had to see where it led. My first real breakthrough came unexpectedly. After months of rejection and reworking my file-sharing application, I landed a small contract with a local real estate office. They needed a custom system to manage property listings and were willing to pay $3,000 for my solution. The money barely covered 2 months of expenses, but the validation was priceless. Someone finally saw value in my skills. Through this client, I received an invitation to a regional tech meetup. I almost skipped it, embarrassed by my worn clothes and inability to afford the networking dinner portion. But curiosity won out, and I attended just the free presentation session. That decision changed everything. While awkwardly hovering near the refreshment table, I overheard someone discussing the exact technical challenge I had recently solved in my application. Without thinking, I joined the conversation and explained my approach. The man listening intently introduced himself as Marcus Kingsley, a software developer with experience at several successful startups. Unlike most people I had met in the industry, Marcus asked questions that went beyond surface level. He challenged my thinking and offered alternative perspectives that I had never considered. By the end of our impromptu discussion, we had sketched out an entirely new concept on a paper napkin. My file-sharing system, combined with his expertise in data security, could potentially solve a major pain point for small businesses trying to collaborate securely. "This has real potential," Marcus said, handing me his business card. "Let us meet next week and flesh this out further." That napkin sketch evolved into CloudBridge, our first product. Marcus became not just my business partner, but the first person who truly believed in my technical vision. We worked out of his apartment, which was marginally better than mine, coding for 18 hours straight, some days fueled by cheap coffee and shared ambition. Our initial pitch to investors was an unmitigated disaster. 5 straight rejections taught us hard lessons about presentation, market analysis, and the importance of having functioning demonstrations. We refined everything and tried again, and again, and again. On our 11th attempt, we secured $50,000 in seed funding from an angel investor who had built and sold a similar business in the 90s. The money allowed us to rent a small office space, really just a converted garage, but it felt like a mansion compared to our apartments. The next 2 years were a blur of coding, customer discovery pivots, and more coding. We lived on the edge financially, pouring every cent back into the business. There were moments when we nearly gave up, especially when a server crash erased 3 weeks of work that we had failed to properly back up. Then came the meeting that changed everything. A venture capital firm specializing in business software requested a demonstration after hearing about our product from one of our early clients. We spent 2 sleepless nights preparing, rehearsing, until we could present in our sleep. The lead investor, a stern woman named Victoria Jenkins, asked the hardest questions I had ever encountered about our business model, technology stack, and scaling strategy. When the grilling ended, she simply said, "We want to talk terms. This solves a real problem." Their investment of $2 million transformed our trajectory overnight. We hired our first employees, secured proper office space, and accelerated development. Within 18 months, CloudBridge had grown from a simple file-sharing application into a comprehensive business collaboration platform used by over 300 small and medium companies. Our growth attracted attention. Tech blogs began covering our company. Industry analysts included us in market reports. Competitors took notice, some offering to acquire us for amounts that would have seemed unimaginable just months earlier. We declined every acquisition offer, believing we had barely scratched the surface of our potential. That decision proved correct when our user base doubled 3 quarters in a row. By year 5, we had offices in 3 cities and over 100 employees. When we took the company public in our 6th year, the market response exceeded even our most optimistic projections. The IPO valued CloudBridge at over $300 million. My ownership stake made me wealthy beyond anything I could have imagined when I left home with $2,000 to my name. By age 27, I had a net worth of over $20 million. I purchased a penthouse apartment in Chicago and a beach house in Florida, investments that my financial advisor assured me were sound. Yet, despite these luxuries, I maintained relatively modest daily habits. I drove a practical car, wore simple clothes, and avoided the flashy lifestyle that many expected from a young tech millionaire. Most surprisingly, even as my professional reputation grew within the industry, I kept my success almost entirely private from family and childhood connections. No social media posts about achievements. No hometown newspaper interviews. Nothing that would make its way back to my parents or extended family. This wasn't about planning some dramatic reveal. I simply found that keeping my success private gave me space to define achievement on my own terms without the weight of others' judgments. Success, I had learned, feels different when you are not seeking validation from those who doubted you. But after 12 years of estrangement from my family, I began wondering if reconciliation might be possible. People change. Maybe time had softened my parents' rigid expectations. Maybe now they could accept me for who I was, not who they wanted me to be. That curiosity led me to make a phone call that would test everything I had built, both financially and emotionally. After 12 years of silence, dialing my parents' number felt surreal. My finger hovered over the call button for several minutes as memories flooded back. The disappointment in their eyes, the cutting words, the slam of the door as I left. I almost abandoned the idea entirely, but something pushed me forward. Perhaps it was simply time to close this chapter, whatever the outcome. My mother answered on the 4th ring. Her voice, instantly recognizable yet somehow older, caught me off guard. "Hello." "Mom, it is Brandon." The silence that followed lasted only seconds but felt eternal. Then, with controlled emotion, "Brandon, this is unexpected." Our conversation was brief and awkward. She asked general questions about my health and whereabouts, but avoided any mention of our last confrontation. When I expressed interest in visiting her, response was polite but guarded. "Your father and I are usually home. Just let us know when." 2 weeks later, I found myself driving a rented Toyota sedan down the familiar streets of my childhood neighborhood. I had deliberately chosen a modest vehicle, not out of deception but because arriving in anything flashy would immediately create the wrong impression. This visit wasn't about proving my success. It was about seeing if genuine connection was possible. The house looked smaller than I remembered, but otherwise unchanged. The same beige paint, the same neatly trimmed hedges, the same American flag hanging by the door. I sat in the car for several minutes, gathering courage before finally approaching the front door. My father opened it before I could knock. Richard Miller had aged considerably, his once dark hair now fully gray, his posture slightly stooped, yet his eyes held the same intensity I remembered. "So you decided to come back," he said. Not quite a question or a welcome. "Thanks for having me," I replied, extending my hand. He shook it briefly before stepping aside to let me enter. My mother waited in the hallway, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. She offered a stiff hug and a practiced smile. "You look healthy," she commented clearly, searching for something positive to say. The house interior was a time capsule. The same furniture, the same family photos on the walls, though I noticed my graduation picture had been removed. New photos showed people I didn't recognize, presumably my sister Allison's family. "Your sister will be joining us for dinner with her husband," my mother explained, following my gaze. "She has 2 children now, a boy and a girl, both straight-A students." The emphasis on their academic achievements wasn't subtle. Conversation during the next hour was painfully superficial. Weather, local news, updates on neighbors I barely remembered. Both parents carefully avoided asking direct questions about my life, until finally, as we sat in the living room with untouched iced tea, my father cleared his throat. "So what exactly do you do for work these days?" The moment of truth had arrived sooner than I expected. I had rehearsed various responses during the drive, ultimately deciding on honesty without detail. "I work in technology, software development and business solutions." "For which company?" he pressed. "A firm I helped start years ago. We provide collaboration tools for businesses." His eyebrows raised slightly. "You started a company without a degree." Before I could respond, the doorbell rang, saving me from immediate follow-up questions. My sister Allison arrived with her husband Greg, both dressed in business casual attire that screamed upper-middle-class professionals. Allison had changed dramatically from the teenage girl I remembered. Now, in her early 30s, she carried herself with the confident air of someone who had followed all the rules and been rewarded accordingly. Her husband matched her energy with the firm handshake and easy smile of someone accustomed to networking events. "Brandon, wow," she said, embracing me briefly. "You look different." Dinner was served promptly at 6:30, another unchanged tradition. As we passed dishes around the formal dining table that had hosted countless uncomfortable family meals in my youth, the conversation inevitably turned to Allison's achievements. Allison just made junior partner at her accounting firm, my mother announced proudly, youngest in the company's history. "We always knew she would excel," my father added. "She had the focus and discipline from an early age." Greg nodded enthusiastically. "The partners love her. She brings in more clients than associates with twice her experience." Allison accepted the praise with practiced modesty, while I pushed food around my plate. "Some dynamics never change." "And Greg's medical practice is expanding," my mother continued. "They are adding a second location next year." The subtext was clear. Here are the successful children who followed our formula. The implicit comparison hung over the table like a storm cloud. Eventually, Allison turned to me with what seemed like genuine curiosity. "So tell us about your life, Brandon. It has been so long. Are you married, kids?" "No to both," I replied simply. "My work keeps me pretty busy." "What exactly is this company you mentioned?" my father interjected. "Something with computers, you said." I explained our business model in general terms, careful to describe it as the company rather than my company. I shared some of the technical challenges we had overcome and the types of clients we served without mentioning our size or success. My father listened with growing impatience. "But what is your position there? Are you management or just technical support?" "I handle strategic direction and product development." I answered truthfully, if incompletely. He scoffed slightly. "Sounds like fancy words for it work. Nothing wrong with that, but it is hardly a career with advancement potential." My mother jumped in with forced brightness. "But at least it is stable, right? You have benefits and everything." "I am taken care of," I assured her. "Good, good." She nodded clearly, relieved I wasn't asking for money. "Though you know it is never too late to finish your degree. Greg's hospital always needs administrators, and they have excellent tuition reimbursement programs." Greg shifted uncomfortably but nodded in agreement, always looking for good people. The condescension was well-intentioned but unbearable. I had run a publicly traded company for years, made decisions affecting hundreds of employees, and created technology used by thousands of businesses worldwide. Yet here I was being offered entry-level career advice, as if I were a directionless teenager. As dessert was served, my father returned to his favorite topic, the value of traditional education. The triggering moment came when he mentioned a news article about tech industry bubbles and overnight successes that disappear just as quickly. "That is the problem with your generation," he declared, pointing his dessert spoon for emphasis. Everyone wants to be an instant millionaire with some app or social media nonsense. But real lasting success requires credentials, authority, respect from established institutions. Something in me snapped. Not in an angry way, but in a moment of perfect clarity. Nothing had changed. 12 years had passed, and they were still incapable of seeing beyond their narrow definition of success. The technology industry has created more economic opportunity and innovation than any other sector in the past 20 years, I stated calmly. Many of the most transformative companies were started by people who saw beyond traditional paths. My father's face darkened. The conversation was about to take an irreversible turn. My father set down his dessert spoon with deliberate slowness, a gesture I recognized from childhood as a warning sign. His jaw tightened as he fixed me with the same disapproving stare that had intimidated me as a teenager. But I wasn't a teenager anymore. There it is, he said, his voice dangerously quiet. The same arrogant attitude that got you nowhere 12 years ago. Some things never change. My mother glanced nervously between us, her fingers fidgeting with her napkin. Allison and Greg exchanged uncomfortable looks, clearly sensing the storm brewing. "Richard, maybe we should talk about something else," my mother suggested weakly. "No, Diane. Our son comes back after all this time still defending his poor choices. I want to hear exactly what he has accomplished with this alternative path of his." He turned back to me. "So tell us, Brandon, how has rejecting education worked out for you? Are you changing the world with your revolutionary ideas?" His sarcasm was thick enough to cut with a knife. I could have answered truthfully. I could have mentioned our company's market capitalization, our industry awards, the thousands of jobs we had created, but I recognized the trap. No achievement would ever be enough if it didn't fit his predefined model of success. "I am content with my choices," I said simply. "Content." He almost spat the word. Content living in what, some apartment with roommates at 32. Content with no degree, no credentials, no real career prospects. That is setting the bar pretty low, son. Allison interjected, trying to diffuse the tension. "Dad, I am sure Brandon has." "Stay out of this, Allison," he snapped. "Your brother needs to hear the truth. Someone has to say it." He stood up suddenly, his chair scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. "You know what really bothers me? The wasted potential. You were a smart kid, but you lacked discipline, commitment, the willingness to put in real work instead of chasing get-rich-quick schemes." "Richard, please," my mother pleaded, but he was building momentum now, years of disapproval, finding its release. "Look at your sister," he continued, gesturing toward Allison. "Same upbringing, same opportunities. But she applied herself. Undergraduate degree with honors, master's in accounting, professional certification. She put in the work, built a reputation the right way. Now she has a beautiful home, a successful husband, children in private school." He paced around the table, warming to his subject. "Meanwhile, what do you have to show for your rebellion? You come here in bargain store clothes, driving a rental car, probably living paycheck to paycheck, doing basic IT work that any community college graduate could do." Each assumption was wildly incorrect, but correcting him wasn't the point. This moment was revealing exactly why I had been right to keep my distance all these years. My mother, apparently deciding my father had the right approach, joined in with her own brand of criticism. "We just wanted better for you, Brandon. Do you know how embarrassing it is when friends ask about you? The Johnson's son is a surgeon now. The Wilson's daughter is a professor at Stanford, and we have to say our son is doing something with computers somewhere. I notice you still haven't mentioned any accomplishments." My father pressed, his voice rising. "Because there aren't any, are there? No degree, no professional credentials, no stability." Greg stood awkwardly. "Maybe we should give you all some privacy to discuss." "Sit down, Greg," my father commanded. "This is family business, and you are family now. I want you to hear this too, as a lesson about parenting. Never let your children throw away opportunity like Brandon did." The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. I remained seated, hands folded calmly on the table, allowing the tirade to continue. Each word clarified my path forward. You know what you are. My father leaned across the table, his face flushed with anger. You are what happens when potential goes to waste. Uneducated trash. A cautionary tale I use when counseling parents at church whose kids want to drop out of college for some internet fantasy. My mother gasped at his language, but didn't contradict him. Allison stared at her plate, unwilling to make eye contact with anyone. Dad, that is completely out of line, she finally murmured. Is it? He challenged. Look at him. 32 years old with nothing to show for it. No career, no family, no achievements. Just excuses and technobabble about changing industries and alternative paths. It is pathetic. He turned back to me, pointing his finger inches from my face. I want you to tell me right now what you actually have accomplished. Specific achievements. Concrete results. Can you even do that? I met his gaze steadily, but remained silent. Nothing I could say would penetrate the wall of judgment he had built. My silence only infuriated him further. That is what I thought. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. He slammed his hand on the table, causing the dishes to rattle. I have had enough of this. I cannot sit here and pretend this failure is acceptable. Richard, he is still our son, my mother whispered. No son of mine would waste his life like this, he roared. Get out. Get out of my house, you lowlife. I cannot bear to look at you and think of what could have been. The room fell deadly silent. My mother covered her mouth, tears in her eyes, but she made no move to contradict him. Allison looked horrified but equally paralyzed. Greg studied the ceiling, as if fascinating architectural details had suddenly appeared. I stood slowly, dignified, and nodded once. Okay, I understand. That is it, that is all you have to say. My father looked almost disappointed by my calm reaction. What would you prefer? That I beg, argue? Try to convince you of my worth? I shook my head. I stopped needing your approval a long time ago, Dad. Just go, he said, deflating slightly but unwilling to back down. This visit was a mistake. I walked to the entryway and collected my jacket. My mother followed, wringing her hands. He does not mean it, not really, she whispered unconvincingly. He is just disappointed because he loves you. That is not love, Mom. That is control. I kissed her cheek gently. Take care of yourself. As I reached for the door, my father called out one last time. When you finally hit rock bottom, do not come looking for help. You made your choices. I turned back briefly. I won't be back. Not until you can see me as I am, not as who you wanted me to be. The door closed behind me with a quiet click that somehow felt more final than any slam could have. In the rental car, I sat motionless for several minutes, processing what had just happened. Then I started the engine and drove away from my childhood home for what might be the last time. My phone rang as I reached the hotel. It was Marcus. How did it go? He asked, knowing the significance of this visit. Exactly as expected, I replied. Maybe worse. I'm sorry, man. Family can be the deepest wound. I stared out the hotel window at the ordinary suburban landscape that had shaped my early years. They still have no idea who I am, and they never will, because they never wanted to know. What now? Marcus asked. What now, indeed? That was the question I pondered as I watched the sunset over my hometown, a place that no longer held any connection to my future. That night in the hotel room became a crucible for my emotions. Anger, hurt, vindication, and grief cycled through me as I replayed my father's words. Uneducated trash, lowlife, the dismissal in his eyes, the silent complicity of my mother, the uncomfortable pity from my sister and her husband. My first instinct was pure rage. I fantasized about transferring $1 million to their bank account with a simple note, "From your failure of a son," or sending a company limousine to their house with an invitation to tour our headquarters. Petty revenge scenarios played through my mind like tempting movie scenes. But as the night progressed, clarity emerged through the emotional fog. What would such gestures actually accomplish? Would proving my financial success suddenly make me worthy of their respect? And more importantly, did I even want the validation of people who could treat their child so cruelly? By dawn, I had reached a decision that felt not just right, but liberating. I would respond not with anger or revenge, but with dignified silence. Success without announcement. Achievement without approval. Living well without their witness. I called my real estate agent as soon as business hours began. "Janet, it's Brandon Miller. Remember that beachfront property in Sarasota we looked at last year? Is it still available? The modern glass one with the private dock. Let me check." I heard keyboard clicks. It actually just came back on the market last week. Previous buyer's financing fell through. Perfect timing. I want to make an offer all cash close as soon as possible. All cash. That will certainly get the seller's attention. How soon are you thinking? Yesterday, I replied with new determination. I want to be moved in within a week. The next hours were a flurry of activity. Calls to my assistant to rearrange my schedule. Negotiations with the seller who happily accepted my offer given the speed and lack of contingencies. Arrangements with a moving company to transfer essential items from my Chicago apartment to Florida. I sent a brief text message to my parents. "Leaving town today. Thank you for your hospitality. No mention of the confrontation. No hint of my feelings. Just a simple acknowledgement that closed the door without slamming it." The satisfaction I felt wasn't vindictive, but centered in self-respect. I had faced their judgment without crumbling. I had stood my ground without descending into their level of hostility. Most importantly, I had finally released the last threads of hope for their approval. 3 days later, I stood on the expansive deck of my new Florida beach house, watching waves roll gently onto pristine white sand. The property was everything I remembered from my initial viewing, a masterpiece of modern architecture with walls of glass that erased the boundary between indoor luxury and natural beauty. 6,000 square feet of living space, 5 bedrooms, a gourmet kitchen I would rarely use but appreciated nonetheless, an infinity pool overlooking the Gulf of Mexico, a private dock where I could eventually moor a boat, though I knew nothing about sailing yet. The purchase price of $4.6 million represented a significant investment even for me, but my financial advisors had confirmed it was a sound long-term asset. I set up my home office in the second floor, study a light-filled space with panoramic ocean views. The desk positioned to face the water became my new command center. Here, surrounded by natural beauty instead of family toxicity, I found fresh energy for work. The routine I established became a healing ritual. Early morning walks along the shore as the sun rose. Video conferences with my executive team. Strategic planning sessions with Marcus, who remained in Chicago, overseeing daily operations, development reviews with our engineering leads. Then, evenings spent on the deck, watching the sky transform from blue to orange to indigo. Work had always been my refuge, the place where my value was recognized without question. Now, with the emotional weight of family expectations fully lifted, I found new levels of creativity and focus. Ideas that had been percolating for months suddenly crystallized. Strategic directions became clearer. Product innovations emerged from conversations that previously felt stuck. A week after moving, I received a tentative text from Allison. "Are you okay? That dinner was awful. Dad went way too far." I appreciated her reaching out but maintained appropriate distance. "I'm fine. Living my life. Hope you and your family are well." She tried several more times to engage, expressing concern and hinting at wanting to maintain some connection. I responded politely but briefly, each time unwilling to be drawn into family dynamics discussions or to become her emotional confidant about our parents. Friends from my inner circle, the few who knew about my family situation, checked in regularly. My college roommate Jackson flew down from New York for a weekend, bringing expensive scotch and much-needed perspective. "You gave them a chance," he said, as we sat by the pool watching stars emerge. "More than they deserved, honestly. You can close this chapter without regret." My therapist, who I had been seeing monthly since the early stressful days of our company's growth, helped me process the experience during our video sessions. She pointed out patterns in my family's behavior that I had normalized but were actually deeply dysfunctional. "Their reaction says everything about their limitations and nothing about your worth," she reminded me. "The parent-child relationship is the only one where we blame ourselves for the other person's failures." As weeks passed, the sting of their rejection gradually dulled. I became absorbed in my new community, meeting neighbors who knew nothing of my background or wealth, but simply appreciated having a quiet professional join their beachside enclave. I joined the local business association, looking for opportunities to contribute meaningfully to the area that was becoming my sanctuary. The house itself evolved from a strategic purchase to a true home. I hired an interior designer with instructions to create spaces that felt both luxurious and genuinely livable. No sterile showroom aesthetic, no ostentatious displays of wealth, just thoughtful design that enhanced the natural beauty surrounding the property. 3 weeks into my Florida residence, life had established a pleasant new rhythm. The confrontation with my parents, while still a fresh wound, no longer dominated my thoughts. I had moved forward literally and figuratively, focusing on the abundant life I had built through my own efforts. What I didn't realize was that the story was far from over. While I had been rebuilding my peace in Florida, events were unfolding that would soon force all parties to confront the truth I had never revealed. The magazine arrived in my mail, along with routine correspondence, its glossy cover featuring my official corporate headshot against a blue background. Tech's quietest billionaire: how Brandon Miller built Cloudbridge into a collaboration giant. The feature had been in development for months, part of a series on industry innovators, and the timing was coincidental, but perfect. I skimmed the 8-page spread with professional interest rather than ego. The journalist had done thorough research chronicling my journey from college dropout to tech CEO with reasonable accuracy. They highlighted our company's culture growth trajectory and my somewhat unusual approach to leadership. The article estimated my net worth at just over $20 million, actually a conservative figure given recent stock performance. What I didn't consider was how quickly this information would spread beyond industry circles to my hometown. The call from Allison came that same afternoon. Her voice trembled with a mixture of shock and what sounded like betrayal. "Brandon, I just had the strangest conversation with Tanya Peters from high school. She asked if I was related to the Brandon Miller who founded Cloudbridge. I had no idea what she was talking about until she sent me a link to a business magazine article." She paused, clearly struggling to maintain composure. $20 million. You are worth $20 million. I sighed, watching seagulls circle above the waves. This moment had been inevitable once I achieved public recognition, though I had never planned for it specifically. "The article exaggerates some things," I replied calmly. "But yes, the company has been very successful." "All this time," she whispered. "At dinner, when Dad was saying those horrible things about you being a failure, you just sat there. You let him believe you were struggling. Would it have made any difference if he knew the truth?" Her silence answered my question more eloquently than words could have. "My God, Brandon, the beach house you mentioned, it is not some little vacation rental, is it? It is my primary residence now. I cannot believe this. Why did you not tell us? Tell me at least." The hurt in her voice was genuine, but it also revealed a fundamental misunderstanding of our family dynamic. "Allison, think about it. When have our parents ever valued me for who I am rather than what I achieved or failed to achieve by their standards? Would money have suddenly made me worthy in their eyes?" "But this is different," she protested. "This is extraordinary success by anyone's measure. Is it Dad made it very clear that without the right credentials, without following the approved path, nothing I accomplished would matter. He called me uneducated trash while sitting across from the founder of a publicly traded technology company. The irony is almost perfect." Allison was quiet for a long moment. "They are going to find out, you know. The article is already circulating. Mrs. Johnson from church called Mom this morning asking if you were that Brandon Miller in the business magazine." I could imagine the chaos unfolding in my parents' household as news spread through their social circles. The neighbors who had heard them dismiss their son for years, suddenly discovering he was a business success story. The church friends offering congratulations for an achievement they had never mentioned. The frantic Googling of my name revealing years of industry recognition they had been completely unaware of. How did they react, I asked, curious, despite myself. Dad refused to believe it at first, called it fake news or a different Brandon Miller. Mom just kept saying there must be some mistake. Allison paused. Then Mrs. Wilson sent them the actual magazine article with your photo. They have been trying to call you nonstop. Haven't you seen their messages? I checked my phone and saw 8 missed calls from their number, along with multiple text messages ranging from confused to increasingly desperate. I have been in meetings most of the day, I said, which was true but convenient. They are freaking out, Brandon, especially after how they treated you. Dad is pacing around, muttering about misunderstandings. Mom is crying in her bedroom. It is like their entire worldview just collapsed. For a brief moment, I felt the satisfaction I had imagined during that hotel night after the confrontation. Their judgment exposed as not just cruel but laughably wrong. Their rigid certainty about success paths shattered by irrefutable evidence. But the feeling quickly gave way to something more complex, a mixture of vindication and genuine sadness for the relationship that could have been. I am not going to call them just so they can backpedal and pretend they always supported me, I said finally. That dinner showed me exactly how they see me regardless of external success markers. Allison sighed heavily. I understand. I really do. But Brandon, there is something else you should know. Her voice dropped. They are in financial trouble. Serious trouble. Dad's retirement investments took major hits in the last recession, and they have been keeping up appearances while struggling to make mortgage payments. That is part of why they have been so defensive about traditional career paths and security. They are terrified of ending up without support in old age. This revelation shifted my perspective slightly. Not enough to excuse their behavior, but enough to add a layer of understanding to their desperate clinging to conventional success metrics. Are they going to lose the house, I asked. Not immediately. But they have been using credit cards to pay bills. It is not sustainable. She hesitated. I am not telling you this to make you feel responsible. Greg and I have offered help, but Dad is too proud to accept it from us. I just thought you should know the full picture. After our call ended, I walked along the beach for over an hour, processing this new information and considering my next steps. The situation had evolved beyond simple estrangement to something that required thoughtful resolution, not for their sake, but for my own emotional closure. 3 days later, Allison arrived in Florida. Standing in my entryway, she gazed around with undisguised awe at the soaring ceilings, ocean views, and evident luxury. This is not what I imagined when you said beach house, she admitted. I gave her a tour, explaining the sustainable design features I had specifically requested and the local artists whose work adorned the walls. We settled on the deck with glasses of wine as the sun began its descent toward the horizon. I owe you an apology, she said after a contemplative silence. I participated in the family narrative about you, maybe not as directly as Mom and Dad, but I never challenged it either. I accepted their judgment without question. We were both products of their value system, I replied. The difference is that it worked for you. Your natural talents and interests aligned with their definition of success. She nodded slowly. But that does not excuse it. I knew how unhappy you were, how your gifts were different from mine. I could have been a better sister. Our conversation lasted hours, unpacking decades of family dynamics with new adult perspective. She shared stories of our parents' increasing financial anxiety, their rigid adherence to appearances despite mounting debt, and their complicated reaction to discovering my success. They are devastated, you know. Not just embarrassed, though there is plenty of that. They genuinely cannot reconcile the son they dismissed with the success story everyone is now talking about. It has broken something fundamental in their understanding of the world. I listened without interruption, allowing her to paint the complete picture of the aftermath. When she finally finished, the stars were fully visible above us, a canopy of light against the dark ocean sky. What will you do? She asked finally. I had been considering this question since her first call. The answer had gradually clarified through hours of reflection. I'm going to speak with them, once directly with clear boundaries, not to gloat or seek apology, but to establish truth and move forward whatever that looks like. She nodded, understanding the significance of this decision. When? Soon, but on my terms, not in response to their panic. As Allison departed the next morning, we embraced with genuine warmth for the first time in years. One relationship at least had found a path toward healing. Whether the others could follow remained to be seen. After careful consideration, I composed an email to my parents 3 days after Allison's visit. The message was neither accusatory nor apologetic, simply direct. I am available for a video call this Saturday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. This will be an opportunity to speak honestly about our relationship going forward. I ask that you approach this conversation with the same respect you would give to any adult, regardless of relationship or circumstance. Their reply came within minutes, a flurry of exclamation points and declarations of love that had been notably absent during our in-person meeting. I found myself unmoved by this sudden enthusiasm, recognizing it as reaction to circumstances rather than genuine change of heart. When Saturday arrived, I prepared my home office, carefully creating a setting that was professional without being intimidating. No obvious displays of wealth in the background, just the inevitable ocean view through floor-to-ceiling windows that could not be disguised. Their faces appeared on my screen precisely at 11, both dressed formally as if for church. My father had trimmed his beard and wore a tie. My mother had applied makeup and styled her hair. The effort to make a good impression was transparent and somewhat sad. Brandon, my father, began immediately, his voice carrying forced joviality. "Son, thank you for making time to speak with us. There has been quite a misunderstanding." "Has there?" I replied calmly. "I recall our last conversation quite clearly." His smile faltered. "Well, yes, things were said in the heat of the moment that were regrettable. If I had known about your business success..." I raised my hand to interrupt him. "That is exactly what we need to address. The idea that my worth depends on financial success or external validation." My mother leaned forward anxiously. "We have always been proud of you, Brandon. Always. We just worried about your future." "Mom, that simply is not true. You both made it abundantly clear that I was a disappointment. Dad called me uneducated trash and a lowlife 2 weeks ago. Those are not words of concern or love." My father shifted uncomfortably. "I apologize for my language. It was completely inappropriate. I was frustrated because we thought you were throwing away your potential. The irony being that I was actually fulfilling it, just not in the way you prescribed." A heavy silence followed, as they struggled to formulate a response that would bridge the unbridgeable gap between their previous condemnation and current knowledge. "We made mistakes," my mother finally admitted, tears forming. "Terrible mistakes in how we treated you. I see that now. We were so focused on what we thought success should look like that we couldn't recognize it in another form." My father nodded reluctantly. "I was wrong, son. About many things. Your path, your choices, your capabilities." Each admission seemed physically painful for him. I believed there was only one road to security and respect. I was narrow-minded. Their apologies continued, sometimes genuine, sometimes sliding into justifications about their own upbringing or fears about economic instability. I listened without interruption, neither accepting nor rejecting their words, simply allowing them to express themselves fully. When they finally ran out of explanations, I spoke carefully, having rehearsed these thoughts extensively. "I did not arrange this call to extract apologies or to highlight your mistakes. What happened between us was not a momentary lapse, but the culmination of a lifetime of conditional approval. I succeeded not because of your approach, but despite it." My father winced but remained silent. "I am not interested in a relationship based on my financial status or public recognition. If we are to have any connection moving forward, it must be founded on mutual respect and acceptance of who we actually are, not who we wish each other to be." My mother nodded tearfully. "We want that too, Brandon. We want to know you, the real you, not just what you have accomplished." "That would be a significant change," I noted. "Are you prepared for that? To accept me even if I made choices you would not make, to respect my judgment, even when it differs from yours?" My father cleared his throat. "I would like to try. I cannot promise perfection, but I can promise effort." Allison had mentioned their financial troubles, information they had conspicuously avoided during this conversation. Their pride even now prevented them from addressing their needs directly. "Allison told me about your financial situation," I said calmly. watching their expressions shift from surprise to embarrassment. I am not going to offer direct financial support, as I believe that would create an unhealthy dynamic between us. However, I have arranged for a financial advisor to contact you next week. He will help create a sustainable plan for your retirement. His services are paid for, and he will not disclose any details of your situation to me. Relief and shame battled visibly on my father's face. That is very generous. Thank you. It is not generosity. It is pragmatism. We cannot rebuild any kind of relationship while financial anxiety clouds every interaction. We spoke for another 30 minutes, establishing basic parameters for moving forward. Regular video calls initially monthly. No discussions of my financial status or their monetary needs. A commitment to honest communication without the expectation of agreement. Small steps toward a relationship that might someday resemble family, though different from anything we had known before. As our call ended, my father asked the question that had clearly been on his mind throughout our conversation. That beach house, is that where you live now? It looks quite nice. I smiled slightly at the understatement. Yes, this is my home. Perhaps someday you will see it in person when we have built enough trust for that to feel comfortable for everyone. After the call, I walked along the shoreline watching sandpipers dart between waves. The conversation had gone as well as could be expected. Neither magical reconciliation nor complete rejection. A beginning, tentative and fragile but authentic, in a way our previous relationship had never been. The journey from that devastating dinner to this moment of cautious new beginning had taught me lessons I would carry forward. True success is defined internally, not by others' measurements or expectations. The validation I had once craved from my parents now seemed irrelevant compared to the satisfaction of building something meaningful on my own terms. Responding to cruelty with dignity is not weakness but profound strength. By refusing to engage in their level of hostility or prove my worth through displays of wealth, I had maintained my integrity while still setting necessary boundaries. Family connections, while important, must be based on mutual respect to be healthy. Blood relation alone does not entitle anyone to mistreat you or diminish your achievements. Most importantly, I had learned that success without inner peace is ultimately hollow. My wealth provided comfort and opportunity, but the real richness in my life came from authentic connections, creative fulfillment, and the freedom to define my own path. As the sun began to set over the Gulf of Mexico, painting the sky in brilliant orange and pink, I felt a sense of completion. Not because all wounds were healed or all problems solved, but because I had finally stopped allowing others' limited vision to define my horizons. I had built success on my own terms. I had faced rejection with dignity. I had responded to judgment with measured grace rather than reactive anger. These were the true achievements, far more valuable than any financial milestone or public recognition. Whatever developed with my family going forward, I would approach it from a position of strength and self-knowledge, neither seeking their approval nor rejecting the possibility of genuine connection. The beachfront property, once purchased as a strategic retreat from family rejection, had transformed into something more meaningful, a symbol of self-determined success and the freedom that comes from defining your own worth. Have you ever had to stand your ground with family who dismissed your unconventional path? What did you learn from that experience? I would love to read your stories in the comments below. If this journey resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more authentic life stories. And remember, sometimes, the most powerful response to those who underestimate you is simply succeeding on your own terms. Thank you for listening, and may you find the courage to define success for yourself, whatever that looks like.